a great session coming up for you. And our host is Marcos Duran. You can see he's just hopped on. So we're going to be presenting Houston. We have a problem avoiding Pardot personalization SOSs. So Marcos, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and pull up my slides real quick. All right. Oof. What is happening? All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcos Duran, and today, like Michelle mentioned, I'm going to be covering in Houston. We have a problem avoiding personalization SOS scenarios with Marketing Cloud account engagement. If you haven't seen me before, welcome to Mar Dreaming. We're here at the tail end of day 2. Still have another day to go. My name is Marcos Duran, and I am a marketing manager at Sercante. I'm sure you've heard Sercante throughout the different presentations. We are a consulting, Salesforce consulting agency that specializes in things like account engagement, marketing cloud engagement, sales cloud, and APIs. For myself, I am a Pardot user group leader here in Austin, Texas, where I am located. I am also a Salesforce author and speaker. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of speaking at Midwest Dreaming, Texas Dreaming, and of course, Dreamforce a couple months ago. I'm also recognized by Salesforce for their Marketing Champions program. So just wanted to give you a little bit about me. What we're going to go ahead and do today is we're going to cover this quick agenda. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what are the personalization features that you are able to leverage in account engagement. Additionally, what I'm going to cover is just some examples of personalization in emails, form, and landing pages. I am going to try to go quickly through like those two because what I really want to get to is how to identify issues, either with your data, with your process, with your strategy, and how to essentially avoid them. Throughout the presentation, I'll have my good friend here, Brandy, who's going to be obviously capturing those moments. As you all know, she's a moment marketer. And then towards the end, hopefully we have some open Q&A for you guys. And I do have a demo org that I built a couple of things, so hopefully I get to show you. But if not, I'll make sure that we at least talk about it before the presentation is over. All right. The only slide that I'm going to really share today with you all on like the different types of personalization items that you can use is going to be this one. If you are just beginning your journey with account engagement, this may be a little bit advanced, but it's always good to just kind of look at what's out there and what you can do. And then after that, hopefully apply it to your org. So we're going to talk about the 3 main features that we can use to personalize emails, landing pages, and of course, forms in account engagement. So we're going to start with dynamic content. So dynamic content is essentially a mail merge value that we are able to leverage. And it works by looking at one very specific field, and you get to choose that field. And it has to be on the Pardot side. So it can be mapped to Pardot and Salesforce, but it has to be on Pardot. And that field has to be populated on the record of the person you're sending, for example, an email to. So in the example below, I have a field, and I'm going to choose the in singular field being country. And I want to make sure that if their country is Ireland, that I show a picture in my email of Ireland. That's how I would want to leverage that. Second, we'll move over to Handlebars Merge Language, known also as HML, not HTML. This works by looking again at that very specific field and just flipping or rendering the value on that person's record. And this can be used again on landing pages, on forms, and on emails as well. Lastly, we'll have one of the newer options. This is called Snippets. Snippets are a little bit more static in their nature. They're not going to look at a specific record and see if they have a corresponding value or not. It is simply, is this snippet supposed to be here? Yes or no? Is it tied to a specific campaign? So essentially, whatever value I put in there, so the value that I would choose for today is going to be Par Dreaming is the best conference for marketers. Everybody will see that value. Versus Handlebars, if we use Handlebars on Michelle, it would say Dear Michelle. And if you used it on me, it would say Dear Marcos. And Michelle being in the States, the image would be something of the United States. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. That was just a quick overview. So I want to go ahead and open up a poll for everybody. Which of the features that I just went ahead and outlined have you guys been up to using in your own account engagement accounts? So I'm seeing the poll kind of like move up and down. We have some folks that are maybe new or just haven't been in Pardot that long and haven't been using any of this. I see a lot of people using Handlebars. This is awesome. If you're starting off, most people will use something like a first name, a company name. We're going to hopefully give you a couple of other nuggets of some other ways of using Handlebars. I see some adventurous folks going into dynamic content as well. Awesome. I'm going to cover a lot of dynamic content do's and don'ts in a second. And I don't see a lot of love for our snippet friends, but we're going to hopefully showcase a couple of things that will trigger some ideas on how to use those as well. All right, I'm going to keep that poll open, but I'm going to move forward. So at Houston, we have a problem, right? I am originally from Houston, so it was kind of like an ode to, my hometown. So I wanted to kind of bring it back, and instead of just focusing on like, this is what you could do, or this is what you can do with the different features, I want to really focus on what happens when it doesn't work, right? What happens when your data fails you, or when you're trying to use all these different features and it's not working out. So essentially the main focus for this session is going to be doing a little bit of show and tell, just so we can get familiar with the things again, but also just calling out ways that this could fail, and ultimately, how do we test, how do we prevent these things from happening? So hopefully that's what you're here for. If not, there's other wonderful sessions that are also happening around personalization. I'm going to go ahead and open up another poll here. So let me close this first one. So the next poll is going to be, what is stopping you from using one of those features? So we had a healthy number of folks in the previous poll that essentially said, hey, I have not used any of these features, right? I have not used any of these features. And so we want to know why that is. And then maybe you haven't used snippets or dynamic content. Why aren't you using those? So we have four options for those of you that are just watching the recording. Again, the question is, what is stopping you from using personalization? We have, I simply don't understand it. I don't know how to set it up in account engagement or Pardot. Option C is, I don't trust the data that I have in my account. And then D, my account just doesn't have access to that feature, right? So with that being said, I'm seeing that a lot of folks are just not really aware of like, where do I go to, what do I click to really set this up, right? So I'm not going to focus too much on like those clicks. Again, I'm focusing on like, what do you do? How do you strategize? So like when you do all the clicks, it doesn't mess it up, but hopefully I'll have a quick demo at the end that I can walk through it all. So hopefully it sticks better. All right, so we're going to start with emails, arguably the number one way that everybody starts when you're using account engagement and you're trying to just, get onboarded. So what we're going to talk about today is I have this email that I built, right? This is just for the sake of the example. This isn't a real email. It may look familiar for those of you that checked your email this morning. So we have a welcome day 2. Let's go. So this email, I have hi, and then you see what we call we still call it a variable tag, but this is called HTML mostly now, an HTML tag. Before, if you're joining us and maybe you were using Pardot before, Pardot used to use these, but they used to have percentage signs around them. Right now, they're curly brackets. So if you are in your account and you're adding like a mail merge field and you still see the percentages, it's time to upgrade, right? We want to upgrade so we can leverage a function that I'm going to go ahead and cover a little bit today. I'm going to go ahead and read out this email. Hey, person, thank you for registering for marketing. Please use this button below to jump into the event. Then we have a button, right? And then we recommend that you watch this 3 fantastic, and then I have another variable, attendees interest, sessions at Mar Dreaming this week. And I know it's really small, but essentially what we have is our competing panel right now happening for Marketing Cloud engagement. Tomorrow we have 2 sessions, one of them with Tim Zidler, who's going to be talking about Marketing Cloud. And then we have another one in the afternoon with Jaime Lopez and Natasha Warren from Love's Travel Shops, where they're going to be talking about Marketing Cloud, Einstein, etc. So in this example, what I wanted to really do, this looks like a fairly simple email. I just kind of wanted to talk about what all goes behind it, right? Or how you could use it, right? So on the top, I have a welcome banner. I can use dynamic content to essentially flip this. And earlier I talked about how this could be something, for example, based on their country. So this could be, hey, an Ireland banner. This could be a day 1, day 2, day 3 banner. This could also be a product banner, right? It could be so many things. And essentially I'm using one email template, but I'm using dynamic content to update it for that person's preferences. Next, we have HTML. So that's for that name. On this particular example, I don't have the additional syntax that I'll show you later, but essentially this would say, hi, Marcos. We'll move forward. And then right underneath that, we could be using a snippet. A snippet, again, is just static text. That's going to be the same every single time. I know I'm going to use this on multiple email templates, so I can create it in Salesforce, share it with Pardot, and then just use it on my templates. Whenever I want to update the static piece of text across multiple assets like landing pages, forms, email templates, I can use snippets. Next, we have our enter event button. Now, we can go one of 2 ways. We can simply have a static button that's going to be purple. The language is going to say enter event. And then on the back end, I can use HTML to update the URL for that button using some code to update that link value in each individual person's record and then pass it over. Or I can have a dynamic content block and simply show different buttons depending on what the person was interested in. So things like the text that it says, the color, and the URL behind the button are things that I'm able to change. On the bottom, I have dynamic content. So because you register and you literally told me you were interested in Marketing Cloud engagement, I went ahead and shared with you 3 sessions that I think are going to be very valuable to you as being a user of that platform, right? And then alternatively, I can do the same thing for Pardot. And then if somebody chose neither, then I can do something more general. So I want to, before I go to that slide, what I want to showcase here is that we're populating different things. So with the name, you could possibly maybe be collecting people's emails and you don't have people's names. So what's going to happen when it says hi and it's trying to render for that person? It's going to be a blank, right? It's going to be a blank, or we can leverage global default. So anytime I'm using first name and there's no data in that record, I can display a specific word. But now with HTML, I'm also able to put syntax in there, and I'll show you in a little bit what that looks like. And then I can say, if there's no name, I want this whole phrase to be something completely different or not there altogether. With dynamic content, in order for me to be able to customize what are the options on the bottom based on your interest, I need to have that data, right? So where this becomes really important is, what are we collecting on our forms, right? What information are we collecting there to make sure that we are able to customize this email communications later when we're sending this welcome emails to you guys, right? All right, I'm gonna head over here to the second part here of the email, and this is something that you may or may not be familiar with if you're doing email campaigns, but this is the sender. I put this here because although it is not technically like I would call a feature, right? It's just kind of part of the email wizard. You are able to customize who the email comes out of, right? I'm not going to go into the whole like relationships and all these things. Essentially, you have 4 options. You either have a general user, something like a marketing at sirconte.com. You can have a specific person like Marcos at sirconte.com, or you can use the lead owner or the account owner, right? So what happens here when you have a queue? Has anybody, and please use the chat for this, but has anybody tried to send an email out and you are actively using queues in Pardot, and have you seen what happens with the sender when you don't have, for example, a lead owner or an account owner and you're using that option? If you haven't had that shot before, I'll tell you, it doesn't show anything, right? So like when you are trying to do signatures, for example, so you're sending from, Marcos Duran, for example, but, when Marcos Duran and then the signature of the email will say Marcos Duran, my phone number, my email, all that good stuff, right? Because it's literally a person. But what happens when it's a queue? A queue doesn't have an email address. A queue doesn't have a phone number. It doesn't have a job title, any of that stuff. So you need to make sure that you are having backdrops to make sure that that information is displaying correctly. Additionally, we move forward to the subject on the bottom. You have this little link called Advanced Subject Composer. You're able to use snippets. You're able to use HTML, things like those variable tags for like first name, company, things like that in them. You're also able to use dynamic content. So you could personalize, text with emojis and all that other stuff, and use it for the subject line. This is particularly useful if you're using one singular template across like an engagement studio. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go over into forms. So how can we use this personalization items on the forms? All right, I have a very simple form here. It says contact us. It says hi, and then the HTML. Welcome back. Please complete the following fields to contact the marketing team. We have 4 fields: name, email, support, preferred language, and then how can we help today? So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and fill it out. I'm going to go ahead and type out my name, Marcos Duran. I'm going to give myself my email. Feel free to write that down and send me any questions afterwards. And for this particular scenario, I'm going to go with Spanish. My preferred language for this for support is going to be Spanish. And then I'm just going to go ahead and type in, hey, I'm having issues with personalizing my emails. Can you help? Right. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this form. But before I do that, I just kind of wanted to call out a couple of things. So you may or may not have seen this before, but you are able to create content blocks that you are able to personalize on your forms, right? So if you look at this form, it has almost like an envelope around it. This is called a wrapper. And then what I'm doing is either on the form template itself, I can create a text field that I can go and put stuff in before the actual fields start, or I can use the above form tab on the out of the box form builder in account engagement. Okay. So what I'm able to put here is I'm able to add, hey, and then it would say Marcos, welcome back. If I am a prospect, or I guess a visitor who is not a prospect and I'm not cookied, then what I can do is say, hi, please complete following fields to contact the marketing team. I remove the welcome back and I don't put a name because I know I don't have that already. Right? I can also substitute that instead of, I can use dynamic content if this is going to change with different languages, for example, and I can still put HTML inside of dynamic content. Additionally, I can make sure that I use that preferred language. So then when I do follow-up emails, that my personalization kicks in and then I do everything in Spanish. So I'm going to take that to a landing page. So let's say I fill out that form that I shared with you guys earlier. What happens afterwards? I'm going to send you to that thank you page. So now what I went ahead and did is I have updated the form to turn Spanish because that's the language that you were preferred. And it's all in Spanish. So just take my word for it. Questions, name, email, preferred language. How can we help today? And I have this little landing page that I build. And it just says Marcos, and obviously that's going to be HTML. Thank you for your question. We will be in touch with you soon. So I just dubbed it here just for your convenience. But essentially, what I have here is because I chose Spanish, I could use dynamic content to essentially flip the form altogether to a Spanish form. I would do this mostly on things like contact us form and not so much on like specific content, but you could also do that on the content forms. Additionally, on the left side, we have HTML inside of dynamic content. So I can flip that not only on the language, but also customize it with the person's name. And you could even take it a step further. If this was content, you can have a button on the left side that says download your piece of content in whatever language it is. If you had the same PDF in multiple languages and you wanted to track them, each of those buttons could go to a different source URL as well. Okay. So that's just kind of like the little process. I got an email, clicked the button, ended up on a form. After I filled out the form, I ended up, with this thank you page, and it's all been customizable along the way. Okay. So now I want to switch over into personalizing planning. Before I do that, I want to go ahead. Let me look at. Okay, so I have a question. Brita, how do you implement fallback text when you don't have the information? I'm about to cover that, so just stay tuned for a couple more minutes and you'll see that. So let me actually go there. So why does your personalization fail? Why are you scared? Why are you not wanting to use this? These are usually the three things that I hear from my customers. Hey, I don't have that data. It's simply something that we haven't prioritized. I don't want to add more fields to my forms because I feel they're already long enough, for example. The second option is like, hey, I just inherited the system. I don't know how this data looks like. It's just too much. Like it's just dirty. I don't trust it. It's misformatted. Names are not capitalized, things like that. And then lastly, user errors. So maybe we're oblivious to the fact that we don't have data or that it could be incorrect. And this is always a margin of error, right? But sometimes as users, when we're trying to implement some of these things, it could simply mean that we deleted an extra curly bracket that shouldn't have been deleted, or we forgot to add it all together. We didn't set a default, etc. All right. So now we're trying to think through like, hey, I want to really use this. Where do I start? So the first thing you should ask yourself is, what do you want to do? Right? If you're just trying to like personalize it for the sake of like saying, hey, I did it, it's probably not a great idea. If it's for like, hey, we want to stay on top of mind of our existing customers and want to upsell them based on their past history, I think that's a little bit more of a good reason than just to do it. But you could always start small, test it, and then decide, like, is it worth going into it? All right, so we're gonna go now to step number 2. What assets do you need? So earlier, like you can personalize just a form, which you can embed on your website. You can personalize a landing page with like things like dynamic content, etc. Just in case you didn't know, dynamic content does work on your website as well. If you weren't aware, you need to make sure you have that website tracking code on your website. And you need to make sure you have a fallback for people that are just regular visitors who are not in your Pardot database, which is probably the majority of your traffic, or emails. After that, we want to talk about, do you have the data to make it happen? So we just kind of talked about, and a lot of folks said, I don't really trust the data. If this is going to be the thing that's going to stop you, I'm going to stop you right there from thinking that. What I would do is I would do a bunch of small campaigns. So what that means is I would take my top 50 accounts. I would take maybe last month's new leads or whatever, and make sure that I look through those using either Salesforce reports, dynamic lists, etc., and then just filter out anybody that doesn't have the field filled out, things like name, or if you're going to use the company name, etc. If there's anything that you can populate, this would be the good opportunity to use services like, I'm going to call out Zoom Info, for example, Clearbit, that can help augment some data for the records that you already own. And then lastly, how are we going to test this? So I'm going to really go into that piece, because I think that's where we get a little scared that, like, are things really going to work out, or are they going to break apart the moment that I launch this campaign? All right. So how to test. So I'm going to hopefully walk you through a quick demo in a second, but essentially what I want to go ahead and do is just cover this 5 things. Especially when you're using dynamic content, one of the things that you always want to test is what happens when I have no data in the system, right? And so you always want to test incognito, because sometimes when you're testing on the normal browser that you are using, you're already cookied, your individual record already has data in there, and you're just not getting the full experience, right? And you want to do this whenever you test emails, landing pages, and forms, because sometimes there's certain features or settings in Pardot forms, landing pages, that say, once somebody has filled this out, don't show this field or show this field or whatever. And, you as marketers probably tested everything already, right? And that starts building like layers, and you need a new kind of like account that doesn't have any of that data, any of those layers. So you can test it as if somebody's coming in for the first time and going through the whole experience. And I think this is one of the number one things why we see not even personalization, but just like things like forms fail. Oh, well, I need a country, right, for this particular process, so I can process this person. Well, that field wasn't available to the person, and so they weren't able to fill it out, right? And so then you have a bunch of errors on your form. And you never got the data, so you could never personalize anything. So there's that. Additionally, I go ahead and set up a internal test list. So depending on how big your marketing team is, I always like to just like create a department of me. So what that means is I'll create like full records in the system that I'm working in for myself with my singular email address. Now, the third option, the second and the third line kind of like relate to each other. You could, of course, have that internal list of prospects be people in your department, so you can test these things. But if you don't have that, or if you don't want to include them and you want to test for yourself before you share, and you have either a personal Gmail address or your organization's email function is Gmail based, what you're able to do is do a plus. So I don't know if you guys know this. I use this on my personal life. So whenever I'm signing up for, Express or any like, department store, like kind of like promo, so I can get those coupons for my birthday. You can add like a plus and then something before the at gmail.com, and that routes back to your actual email address. So essentially you're creating multiple prospects with technically unique email addresses, but they're all will end up in your same inbox. And then because you'll see the send to option, you'll be able to differentiate, who they were supposed to go to, or like where you signed up for that store. So I use that, and I use it for work, and I use it obviously for my personal life. Additionally, when we're talking about HTML and dynamic content, don't forget to use the default value. I know I have a question. I'm getting to it. And then we want to make sure we use the preview and the testing tools available within account engagement to make sure we're testing. So with that said, I'm going to hopefully, let's see if we can get to this demo. All right. So here I have 4. Oh, they reverted. Okay. Let me do this real quick. I have 4 records, and they're all Marcos. And I'm just going to open one so I can show you what they look like on the inside. I went ahead and gave them a first name of like Marcos 1, 2, 3, 4. I had done the letters that I'm about to share in a second, but they reverted in this. Okay, I'm not going to do that then. So all of these have a field called, can I pull that up here? All right, cool. Test. Email. Cool. All right. So here on the test one, I want to make sure that I have 4 emails, and they essentially just say Marcos plus test 1, 2, 3, and 4, or A, B, C, and D as their content.com, and they're all going to go back into my instance. I also have a test pick list with the letters A through D. Okay. That's going to be the field that I'm going to use for dynamic content in a second. All right. All right, so I went ahead and built a dynamic content block, and that dynamic content block is using a test pick list. And then I have a default option that says show nothing. And then I have 2 options here, one that says the variable should be B and the other one should be C, right? If it's A or D or it's clear, it'll show nothing. And I literally put those words show nothing. So then I'm going to go over and I'm going to focus on an email example because email is kind of like the way to go. And I have this banner. And I want to notice here that I have syntax. So I'm going to go ahead and actually grab this. And I'm just going to send it over in the chat. I think we had a question on like, how do you like actually do that? We also have blogs on the spot for part that I wrote that you can also like look at that. But ultimately what this is saying is if you have a name, I want it to say hi, space, name of the person, comma. If I don't have a name else, just say hi with an exclamation mark and like call it a day. After that, I have a piece of dynamic content here. And then I have another piece of dynamic content right underneath it. But the main difference is that this one up here and then this first line have like a little bit of padding. It's about 20 pixels. And then the last one is like literally up into the edge. And then we have our footer. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I told you to use the preview button. So one of the ways that we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to let this load, and there's a preview tab here. It's loading. Come on, buddy. And then when I click on this, I'm going to click on the option C specifically. So what that's going to do is I see my name and my email. So it just changed to Marcos C on the subject line. When I scroll down, it also showed me the first piece of dynamic content, which I said letter C is for cash. And then on the bottom is showing me, oh, that's really grainy. it's showing me like two like columns, right? The reason why the dynamic content on the second one didn't have the spacing is because I put the spacing in the dynamic content block. If I add that, it would add double spacing. So that's something that's usually an issue when you're testing dynamic content. I'm going to go ahead and leave this because it's just too grainy. I'm going to come back to my slides. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Not better. All right, so if you're going to test dynamic content, you want to test it by proving it and sending yourself a test email. You want to make sure that you build out, like especially if you're doing multi-columns or forms or anything, or not forms, images in the email, you want to build it out in the email first, so you can use things like Litmus to render it and see that it looks good first of all. After that, you take that code and put it into dynamic content, so then it can update correctly. So that's the way that you do it, and you just kind of rinse and repeat. Additionally, for HTML in emails, you want to build a dynamic list of anybody and leave anybody out who doesn't meet the criteria, so they're not in your list to begin with. And you want to add that syntax that I threw in the chat to make sure you can add your backups. And then you just want to use that preview button. That's actually really good for HTML specifically. Here's some things to keep in mind. Personalization requires strategy and good data. You want to check your tier to make sure you have access to everything. And then you want to make sure you always test incognito, and then also with a cookie prospect. Reminder that queues do not have signatures. So you want to make sure if you're using something like sales at your organization as an email sending domain, that is tested and maybe set up as an identity user. And you just want to make sure you test. Hopefully, you got a little bit of ideas here. Let me go ahead and grab some stuff from the chat. Let's see. Is there a way to avoid limitations in dynamic content where one variant equals one value? You could, something that I've done before is done in Engagement Studio, where like when two things meet one, you're essentially updating another like custom field, usually a drop down because it's easier. And then you'll say when this and this is true, then change this like third field or second field, like essentially to update this, so then you can use it. But that would be the only way to use it. Danielle earlier in today's conference talked about like putting dynamic content inside dynamic content, but like each individual block is still belongs to just one field. So unless you're able to combine through either Flow or Engagement Studio and create a new section, you're not going to be able to use multiple values to populate dynamic content. If you just want to use a default global value, you can go to Pardot settings and find that field under the prospect field. You're able to add something like valued partner, but it will literally be that anytime it's blank across all of your emails. So in order to prevent it from that, I prefer to use the syntax that I threw in the chat, because this one you can customize it based on the template, so it's a little bit more specific. Can you, Katie has a question. Can you, okay, so that was answered already. Thank you.
Marcos, we do have one more in the chat about, can you speak more to testing incognito and the purpose of that?
Yeah, so sometimes when you're testing, like this is particularly when you're like building forms and landing pages in general, not so much for personalization, but it could also affect personalization, is like you're the marketer. You're probably the one that sets up all the forms anyway and just either work with IT or even you just embed them yourself. When you do this so many times, what happens is like your record, like Marcos Duran, ends up with like 4,000, like a score of 4,000, right? Because you're just constantly in there every day doing things over and over again. And so what happens is you end up with just a bunch of different data on your record. And so when you go and do incognito, you're coming in fresh as a new lead with none of that historical information. So that's why you would want to do incognito. Cool.
Seems like we're out of time. Thank you, Marcos, for that amazing session. And everybody enjoy the rest of the sessions today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.